Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this morning's webinar, which is jointly hosted by Dukefield and Apogee. My name is John Shenry, and I'm the Dukefield Group CEO and the primary lead for the National Education Digital Transformation Framework. I'll be shortly introducing to you to Nick Harris from Apogee, who will be conducting the majority of today's webinar. Just before we start, there are a couple of points just to discuss with you. So first of all, there is a Q&A function next to chat on your screen. If you have any questions to ask throughout today's webinar, then please put them into that chat, and myself and Nick will try and do those answers at the end of today's session for you. Copies of the presentation will be available later, and they will be circulated to all attendees. And just to let you know, we're also recording this webinar, and there will be a video available for circulation and featured on our YouTube channel as well, if you want to share that with any colleagues or anybody that you may feel would be a benefit to see it. Before handing over to Nick, I would also like to just give a quick overview of Dukefield and the National Education Digital Transformation Framework that provides a compliant route to market to access all the services that Nick will be talking about later today. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you again for attending today's meeting. Just a quick overview of who Dukefield are and Dukefield Print Solutions. We are responsible for management of a number of frameworks on behalf of public sector bodies. We've got a lot of experience, over 20 years of experience of frameworks and contract management, particularly within this field in terms of digital transformation, print and technologies. And we offer an efficient and effective solution to procure such devices and any of those services that we're going to discuss today. The framework comes with a full support network in terms of a help desk and user guides, etc. And again, we'll be providing these to you with the following communication from today's webinar. The framework, in fact, all the frameworks we operate are fully compliant to the UK public sector contracts regulations, and therefore they've been through a stringent evaluation process in appointing the suppliers that sit within the framework itself. And again, something that is very important, that the framework is supported by pre-agreed terms and conditions to protect the framework users in terms of their activities. Next slide, please. In terms of the framework itself, it's a very broad spectrum of products and services that it covers, and we have 13 in total, those on the screen here, as you can see, ranging from traditional sort of print equipment right the way through to IT support, cloud services, scanning, document management, and even through to telecoms and audiovisual supplies as well. Each or any of these services can be procured individually throughout the framework, or as in many cases, customers can now provide a blended solution to their requirements by engaging with one of the suppliers. And today, Nick is going to show you in terms of the added value services that Apogee can provide, particularly aligned to your IT functionality. Right, I'd like to hand over to Nick now, if you'd like to control, Nick.
Indeed. Okay, so my first issue before we start here is that I'm on the slide saying today's agenda, and I believe you may be seeing the one prior to that. Can you just confirm that, John, please?
No, I can see that. That's working fine.
So you can see today's agenda as well, yeah?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining the call today. As John said, my name's Nick Harris. I work within Apogee as the IT Technical Assessment Consultant, which in time-honored fashion is as broad a title as you can get to cover a multitude of sins. My history within throughout my career is that I would say I've spent 15 plus years within audit, a lot of that within print, but more latterly within IT. For those of you attending who may not be of a technical disposition, I don't want you to worry about that. This is more to do with, or my role is more to do with data gathering, the interpretation of that data, and then putting that into a more manageable, meaningful translation thereafter. So I will try and avoid it being too technical by any means. But this is all to do with the fact that the DfE direction is around planning, not panic, moving away from ad hoc procurement and break fix approaches, and hopefully we'll be able to take you through this this overview, talking about where planned lifecycle management, including devices, will be a great way to move forward for each of the attendees here. So what we're going to cover is literally common IT challenges. I'll go through that very shortly. We'll talk about the IT audits that are most prevalent in what we're doing now. We have a section on IT asset disposal as well, and explain what that is and what it means in turn. And last but no means least, we'll have a summary as to why we were on the webinar and what to consider next. So from there, why are we on this webinar for starters? Well, I think if we look at the number of people attending today and the various common issues that are being faced by attendees, it could be down to the resource or expertise shortage, budget constraints. I don't think that ever changes for anyone. And rapid growth plans, not least exacerbated by mergers, through sponsorship, through conversion as well, and the trials and tribulations that they bring in turn. So we'll try and give some clarity around how we may be able to improve that understanding as well. Likewise, for a lot of MAT leaders, there's the usual pressures around trying to improve learning outcomes for students, to improve staff productivity, not least around digital equity and making sure that students are getting the right access in the right manner, and all of this whilst having budgets that make it very, very tricky to do that. So always a bit of a plate spinning exercise, and hopefully there'll be some clarity, as I said, around this as we move forward. So I mentioned common IT challenges. Now, forgive me, I'm not going to read out every single one of those, but if you'd care to have a look through, I would imagine one or two of you will see some of these ringing bells rather loudly. And this is an exhaustible list. You could have more than this, but this is the common ones that we see. I am going to pick on a couple of them, essentially, is that the ones that do make a difference, and that is where the lack of visibility into IT device health or inventory. Part of that comes down to the fact that you've got mixed estates from the mergers, and the fact that you don't necessarily have absolute clarity on what exists and where, certainly not the health. And trying to maintain that is always harder when you have got new estates coming on board. Likewise, I'm very conscious that IT departments are often seen as a reactive unit, whereby you're always on the back foot trying to solve issues rather than trying to take things forward, which doesn't really help when you're trying to be proactive. I think the worst case scenario is, as you see in the box to the right hand side here, that when nearly half of staff and students don't call IT when they experience issues that impact work. Why is that? And it's often the case, and I suspect we've all had it, that we're used to a device being slow, being clunky, just being the way it's always been, and just giving up on expecting it to be better. So this is one of those things that we would like to explain why that might be the case and what we can do about it. So from the perspective what the IT audits are and why conduct them, the first thing is we'd like to give you a complete a spectrum idea of exactly what your estate looks like, a data-backed view of what status it's in from a readiness perspective for Windows 11, if you haven't already moved there, the reliability, any security issues. Sometimes it's fair to say you will have access to some of this information, no denying that, but my experience on this is we'll be able to provide more information than you may already have to hand, and on that basis, the more we can provide, the better it will be, I'm sure, for everyone. The fact that we can deliver this evidence in the manner we do, as much as anything else, and along with clear, compelling next steps, that is the key factor. Rather than just giving a spreadsheet, which effectively is a list of data that you could look at and just go, okay, so what? The aim is that we can actually make the next steps clearer and give you that guidance in turn. And because we're exposing the bigger picture by virtue of how we're doing this, instead of going for that ad hoc purchase approach that may be existing at the moment, it will help you design your own 3 to 5 year strategy and empower you to make the right decisions going forward. So ultimately, this is all based on what we can do for you as part of this service. And as you'll discover shortly, this is not a charged for service. This is supported by HP, funded by HP, and provided without fee or obligation. So hopefully that's whetted a few appetites already. So the two most popular audits that I'd like to focus on that we conduct within IT focus around what we call end user compute assessment and the Windows 11 readiness assessment. The former of these is basically focused on IT assets, principally laptops and desktops, to show what the Windows build is, the asset status, especially age, reliability and security, because they are paramount to maintaining the working condition for the device and clearly the productivity of the user, whether they be staff or student. And likewise, with regard to Windows 11, it may well be that some of you have already upgraded to Windows 11. However, we will probably find at some stage there will be devices that are running Windows 11 that simply haven't got the sufficient specification to run that successfully. Dare I say it, using a car analogy, I'm going to use this a couple of times as we move through. This is like, we've all seen the youngsters who've got what was the Vauxhall Nova of its time, but they've added the wider tires, they've added the big exhaust. It doesn't make the car any faster or any better. And that's the same thing we're finding with a number of the upgrades that have happened. It's really pushing the car too far. It's pushing the device too far with trying to get it to work on Windows 11 when you need better processors and better RAM to make it work. So, as I said, this is provided by ourselves without fee or obligation because of the HP funding that we have as an HP owned company. So I hope that will be of interest. So what are we talking about when discussing end user compute and what might that look like with the Windows 11 capability? Anyone who has any familiarity with some of these terms will see that you have access to this information, or some of this information, more the point, but not necessarily all the information. And that's what we're hoping to provide as part of this service. One of the benefits is that every aspect of this audit can be done remotely. Unlike a print audit, we don't need to come on site. We can get access to the data through the data collection agent that we will send through to you. There's complete flexibility in the way that data collection agent is deployed. You can do it via Intune, you can do it through SCCM. It may be that you want network discovery or group policy object. It's entirely your call. And the fact that there's no impact on network or user productivity makes it even more bearable. And typically, we would recommend this be done for any estate that is 25 devices minimum. And we've had estates that are literally 25 up to nearly 4,500. So it's entirely whatever the customer has. So what sort of information might we provide at the end of this? Well, just to give you an idea from the snapshot of the exec summary that we provide, we have information that will appeal to those who would like more pictorial evidence, if you like. So we have around about 14 different donuts in this format, and you may think, well, what's important about BIOS health? What might be about the OEM split, etc. BIOS health is the basic input-output system, is basically the most fundamentals software within the computer itself. And effectively, if you want to make sure that you've got bugs addressed, you want to have it securely patched, etc., on a regular basis, That is why that's so fundamental to looking after the device. In many ways, it's just like having the car serviced each year rather than saving money and not doing it for 3 years and then seeing, what sort of price you pay for that at the end of the day. The key factor is that we find sometimes customers have not actually upgraded their BIOS setting for anywhere between 18 months and 3 years. The risk of that, clearly, from the bugs perspective and the security breaches, is I think speaks for itself. Likewise, if we look at some of the other ones that we can discuss, and these are discussed at length within the report itself, it could be, as I mentioned earlier, we can clarify about Windows 11 capability and not just functionality. It could cover the antivirus security, but BitLocker, if anyone's not familiar with BitLocker is basically a Microsoft supplied application that helps encrypt hard drives on a laptop or desktop. Why would that be important? Well, should it be a laptop and for some reason someone's left it on the back seat of a car or on a bus or a train, wherever, should that device not have BitLocker applied, all the data that's on the drive can be accessed, which I'm sure within an education environment, no one wants to have happen. However, we find numerous customers who aren't aware of that fact, aren't on board with trying to make sure they've secured that. So it's a key factor to consider. For those who would prefer details within a more written format, we have, going back again to what I mentioned earlier, a bit like a car service check, we have a red, amber, green format. And just to sort of provide a bit more clarity about this, why would we want to go do this? If you look at this from a left to right perspective, we'll be discussing what the observation is of the assessment, what the implications and risks are of a key observation, and then from a high level perspective, what recommended action we'd advise on. And again, Apogee can help towards providing that service, but it's not just important for those of you within IT roles, it's equally important for those who are decision makers, budget holders, to get that clarity rather than take it on trust from, as I said, nothing more than a spreadsheet. So hopefully that's making sense so far. So just to give a bit more clarity, for instance, on the estate age perspective, which is a fundamental part, certainly within education, this is the sort of thing that we would give some explanatory text beforehand and then talk about with clarity. This is the way that your estate is made up, when it very clearly can clarify exactly how many devices are 5 years old, 7 years old. We have had ample occasions where they are 10 plus years old. You can see why people may be having that experience of a device going slow, less functional than they'd like it to be, and wondering why their productivity is not what it might be. All of this is all backed up by a spreadsheet. We don't lead with the spreadsheet, but the spreadsheet itself will be flagged again within a red, amber, green perspective. So we can point out which devices, for instance, are still running Windows 10, which devices have BitLocker switched off, which devices may have multiple installs of antivirus security, and which devices are getting long in the tooth, and therefore you may want to be aware of planning for the future. So the spreadsheet alone is there to back up the report, doesn't replace the report, but it gives you everything you need to say, get that clarity and think about the next steps. So what will you be getting from our audits? What would we be urging you consider for this? Effectively, as I said earlier, every aspect of data around your IT estate will be gathering remotely. There's no impact on the network, no impact on the user productivity. And we typically allow 30 days to gather this data. Why do we allow 30 days? Principally because if people are off ill, on holiday, whatever, they're unlikely to be using their laptop. And as long as they are only logging on once in that 30-day period, and their device reports in through being accessible through the internet, then we will capture all the data we need on that device at the time. Typically, the write-up of the report will be barely 5 days. Typically, it's probably nearer 3 days in reality. And throughout the whole project, you'll be receiving weekly updates as to how many devices we've captured, so that we can agree between us at what point we should start the write-up for you. But it will provide that complete visibility, as I said, and it will provide the complete health assessment that you have of each and every device, and that's marked down to make, model, serial number, and everything else for you as well. What that will result in is a high level assessment summary that I will happily present back to you. To back that up, there'll be a more detailed and comprehensive report. And to give you an idea, the report itself is around about 40 to 42 pages in length. And then the spreadsheet is there to provide the absolute backup clarity as needs be. So that is the focus for our audits. And so far, I think it's opened a few eyes, as we'll discover later. But it is something that I would urge you consider if you are in that position whereby you've got merged estates or have growth plans or are struggling with budgets. For all those reasons, it's something we can help you with. So I also mentioned earlier, asset disposal. Why might you want to consider that? And this is where at the end of a device's useful life cycle, you need to get that disposed of. And clearly, putting it in a skip or general waste is not the way to handle that. It is essential that you protect the data on these devices and consider what to do. And I would be surprised if there weren't at least one or two attendees on this call that possibly have an area of a room or even a room entirely dedicated to stacking up older equipment, thinking we must sort something out about that. And then 6 months later, probably saying we must sort something else about that. And that's where I'm hoping that we might be able to give you a lead on that. So the aim of having an asset disposal scheme is that it helps you stay ahead of evolving tech needs. Doesn't mean that you have to replace everything on a 2 or 3 year basis, but we can help you avoid sitting on that device for the best part of 7+ years. And we want you to be able to dispose of it through a sustainable means and also get money back on it, which is, I think, a key differentiator versus other schemes that exist out there. And I'll explain a bit more about that shortly. Likewise, you may have environmental goals or environmental social governance goals that we can help support because of a circular economy report that is provided as part of this process. I'll explain that again in a moment's time. And then the key factor I think that differentiates our service around asset disposal is not so much that we're disposing of it from a recycling perspective. The aim is that through HP Enterprise, part of our wider parent body of HP, who conduct the actual renewal of these devices when we have them taken care of. They are very, very much focused on refurbishing and giving devices a second life. And therefore, with all the devices that we've dealt with so far, 94% of all devices received by them have been able to go into a second life. So we're trying to put as little into landfill, into recycling, and so forth as possible, which I think does make a sizable difference. So this scheme, if I can take you around this clock face that you can see, starting at point 1, we don't expect you to have to do anything ahead of time on this. You can have all devices left loose. They will be palletized. They will be collected and carefully wrapped on those pallets as well. They then go in a truck that is effectively CCTV controlled and also GPS tracked. From a security perspective, that's quite fundamental, as you'd imagine. They go to what is our technology recycling centre based to the west of Glasgow in a place called Erskine, where each device will be assessed upon receipt, and that will provide a full breakdown, literally make, model, serial number, etc., where you will have every device graded and any data that is held on any of those devices carefully taken care of and wiped as well, as I'll explain on the next slide as well. The aim, as I said earlier, is that we can try and get these devices remarketed for you, and thereby getting money back through reselling them elsewhere. Now, I mentioned a moment ago, this is a charged for service, so it's not free. However, our experience is for the majority of the occasion we're dealing with these requirements, the value that is gained from the resale actually eclipses the cost of the service in its own right. So if that gives you funds that you can put towards a device renewal scheme or future planning, then that has to be worth considering. So I hope that may be of interest there as well. So just to clarify, when we take the devices back to our technology renewal centre in Scotland, that building on the left that you see there, for those of you old enough to remember, this is actually a building that used to be run by Compaq before HP took over Compaq. And inside that building is where you see it on the right-hand side. So this is no small undertaking and not a part-time effort, as you can see. There's a huge amount of work goes on there. And to emphasize that further, that is the biggest plant in Europe doing this level of work. In terms of the sanitization of the data that is held on any drive or any server that is returned, we have that basically handled through Blanco. Blanco have 13 accredited registrations worldwide. It is by far the de facto name and standard for any data wiping that goes out there. And for anyone who may be considering, that's fine about the data, what about the idea of the drives that the data is held on? Well, hard disk drives, they are basically degaussed, which is demagnetized, so there's no ability for data to be held on those drives. Solid state drives, they get basically demolished because you can't demagnetize those in the same way. But there is absolutely no risk of any data ever getting out of into the wider world. And when this plant handles equipment for governments, for the military as well, you can see that this is a case of no stone being left unturned. So what could you expect from our scheme with relation to what we can do here? Despite this being very much an HP company that I belong to, that we are owned by, it can include any form of IT equipment and any brand of any IT equipment. Effectively, it isn't about the make or the model and the badge on the front. It's about what's inside that device that we want to make sure that we can get refurbished and sold on for you. There are no minimum quantities to consider. As I said earlier, collections are by pallet, so it's as much as we can fit safely onto pallets in terms of any kit, and clearly there's a certain maximum that you can get onto each pallet. But likewise, from the turnaround time, and we wouldn't be charging anyone anything until the whole process is finished and we know exactly what everything has been sold for. It can typically take about 60 days for fast moving goods like laptops and desktops. If you've got data switches, if you've got servers, that might stretch it to about 90 days. But again, we'll keep you posted through every step of the way as to what milestone is being passed and when to expect the next stage. As part of the process, you're going to receive the disposal certificate that you would expect as a matter of course. There'll be a comprehensive breakdown provided showing exactly what device was graded, what the make, model, serial number was, etc. Of that, how it was graded, how it was passed on, whether it was recycled, whether it was refurbished. And again, the circular economy report that is provided by HPE as part of this service enables you to get clarity for any ESG focus that you may have within your trust. So it'll clarify exactly, for instance, how much CO2 emissions were saved by taking the process forward as we did, what landfill space may have been saved through the refurbishment and so forth. So it's a great story to be able to share both internally and externally. And last but not least, there's the rebate to consider as well. And I think anyone who can get money back on any scheme like this, that has to be of interest, I'm sure. So I've talked about the audits. I've talked about the IT asset disposal scheme, and I'm sharing this this particular slide just to give a little bit more clarity as to the sort of feedback we're getting about this. We're not the only people to provide IT assessments, but I do believe that we are relatively unique in providing IT assessments in the way that we do it. And likewise, the IT asset disposal scheme that we provide is equally somewhat unique, not run-of-the-mill by any means. So my hope is that there's a few things I've said there that have touched a few hearts and might inspire you to engage with us going forward. So why were we on this webinar? I set out at the start of this. The aim is that we're trying to bring clarity to what may be inherited complexity for each of you. We want not just to enable you to see the light, but likewise empower you to move forward faster as well with the information we can provide. Not least because we said earlier, some of you will have had trusts that have grown through conversion or merger or sponsorship. You will have different asset registers of the estates that you have, some of which may be out of date, or you may not even have any register. So that sort of clarity has to be a good thing. There may be different strategies that you're working towards, some that differ to what you were used to, and things that you need to accept change around. Anything we can clarify and help you towards making that change easier to handle has to be a good thing. And as the DfE guidance there shows, it's essential that you know what device and service you have if you're going to be managing risk, security, and resilience capably. Likewise, without this clear insight that we can offer, the danger is that you leave yourself exposed to either data protection risks or from a student perspective, inconsistent learning experience. It goes back to the digital equity we spoke about earlier. So anything that can help improve that has to be a good thing. So from this point, I would say if any of you have any requirements that I would be able to assist with, please contact us through itaudit@apogeecore.com. If needs be, I'd be happy to go through this on a one-to-one with any attendees again, should you wish for a wider audience. Be more than happy to help. But please don't think this is a one-off that you need to rely on. More than happy to take any queries from there. And I think that's my time up. And there may be one or two questions that I can answer. But thank you otherwise for listening. I appreciate everything you've done, putting time aside for this. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Very informative, and I'm sure everybody will have found that certainly of great interest as I have. We haven't got any questions at the moment in time. I don't know if anybody has any questions, if they'd like to post them quickly now. But if not, there will be a full communications following up from today's webinar. And if you'd like to ask any questions either directly through myself or through Nick, we'll be more than happy to take them offline later today or at some point in the future. I can't see anything coming in, so can I take this opportunity to thank everybody for their attendance today? It's very much appreciated, and I hope you found it very informative. Can I thank Nick again for an excellent presentation and one that's been very informative, and wish you the best going further forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much.